Hi, everyone. My name is Camilla Vaitaitis, and this is CCJA Sundays, which is a weekly masterclass and interview series with the Colorado Conservatory for the Jazz Arts. Tonight, I have the pleasure of speaking with bassist Tim Lefebvre. Hi, Tim. How's it going?
Hi Camille. Hi, Colin. Hi, everybody. How you doing?
Good. How's everything in Arizona where you're at?
Oh, everything's good. It's hot. It's just finished a very. We're going on vacation, my wife and I, on starting tomorrow. We just finished off a hellacious couple months. So yeah, it's time to take a couple days off because I've been like out doing records and stuff like that, and she was just playing with St. Vincent. So yeah, they were doing all these video shoots in SNL a couple of weeks ago. So we've just been like running around like crazy. It's been
That's
good.
amazing. Is it part of like the new St. Vincent record that's coming out?
Yeah, I think she's going to be part of the touring band.
That's so amazing. St.
Yeah,
Vincent's one of my favorite artists. That's really cool.
yeah, yeah. The new record's cool. It's like a old. It's like David Bowie, Young Americans, or
Mhm.
Steely Dan. Like Michael Lenhart did all the horn stuff on it, which I didn't know.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, it's pretty good. Pretty good record. I like it.
I got a cool T-shirt of that for that album.
From Daddy's Home.
Yeah, it says
You got
like
the
Daddy's
T-shirt?
Home, and then the back has like this really cool artwork of Annie Clark. It's like amazing.
Sweet.
Yeah,
Sweet, sweet.
cool. Well, you've been pretty busy, it seems like, even despite the pandemic. And I know you just released a new single back in March, and also a new album that was recorded in Germany recently, or it was recorded back in 2019 but released recently. Could you talk a little bit about what you've been up to?
Sure, sure. Oh, yeah. So that record that just came out, that was the one on Act with Michael Walney and Emile Parisien and
Mhm.
Christian Lillinger. Yeah, they're all like kind of. I used to play with Michael Walney back in the day. Like before I got the gig with Tedeschi Trucks, he had this trio called the M Trio, which is like initials of everybody in the trio. But the bass player got pregnant. She was really good, but so she got pregnant, and so like they needed to keep going, keeping the group going. So I ended up joining, and we did a couple records, and it was a really fun run. I was actually playing upright bass. Like being an upright bassist is a whole trip, you know. um, but yeah, so like Michael and I like kind of had a cool hookup, like just mentally, like we just kind of thought about stuff pretty similarly. So when I told him I didn't, like when I quit Tedeschi Trucks, we decided to do some stuff again. So. Yeah, so then he booked 4 nights at the A Train in Berlin last December, and a year ago December, and then as it turned out, they multi-tracked each night. So ended up we ended up like taking the tracks and working with my friend Jason Kingsland, who's like a brilliant producer engineer from Atlanta, and we went there and we kind of worked the tracks around. So we ended up shaping it into a kind of a record that I'm thrilled with, and I think it's kind of. As far as I can tell, like the reaction to it is pretty strong. Either people like the people who are really traditional, straight ahead people don't love it, and I totally understand. It's pretty out there. But on the other hand, I think we broke some new ground with it, so that's pretty
Yeah,
exciting.
it's amazing, and it's hard to believe it's all improvised.
It is. It is. I mean, the thing about that, like improvising doesn't mean it's just, they used to call it in New York. They used to call it fire in the pet shop, where you go down and you go to the. What was that club in New York that was like they had all the avant-garde stuff? Knitting Factory, or whatever. Yeah, Knitting Factory. So like it wasn't just like they used to call it fire in the pet shop, and it's just like everybody just going nuts. I've done enough of that stuff where like it I kind of think of it as a more groove-oriented avant-garde thing. So that's kind of like so like some of the stuff can end up sounding composed because everybody's trying to go a different, a similar direction or something like that. Um, it's always hard to guess because it's so in the moment, but yeah, some of it does sound like songs. I agree with you, which is cool.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, I recommend everyone if you haven't checked it out. It's really cool.
yeah.
Um,
It's not for the faint of heart, but it's pretty. I'm proud of it. It's really good.
yeah, and I think I read there was like 8 hours of material, and you guys picked from that.
Yeah.
What was that process like, figuring out the moments to
Well,
highlight?
at that point, I didn't really pick out the moments. I just helped produce it when we got to the studio
Oh, okay.
because I was on tour with Wayne Krantz. So like I jumped off the tour. We had a couple days off. I flew to Atlanta and then helped. I'm good at like sound shaping and making stuff. As everybody in the band is really. That was kind of more my role. Like coming in there and let's put this plug in on this and blah blah blah. So That's what my role wound up being. But yeah, I was just done those days, and they had already decided what Michael had pared down what was going to wind up on the record, like more or less. There was still some more to do when I got there, but the 45 minute to an hour, whatever. I don't even know how long the record is, but that was already kind of in place when I got there. So
okay.
yeah, Michael did a lot of the legwork.
Could you talk a little bit about producing and when you got into that and how that factors into your career? And
yeah, I mean, that at this point it's kind of my passion, because it's now we're going on, what are we going on? Like 15, 16 months without really having live music. I mean, there's been some obviously, but it's something I've always wanted to kind of lean into. And I've had more chances now that there's nothing going on to do it. So I've been sort of flying all over the country doing records with people. I live, like now that I'm not in LA, we're like, we live pretty close to Sonic Ranch. So I've been involved in a couple projects there. There's going to be a bunch in the fall that we're doing. We're going to do like I don't know if we're going to have a label or not, but also right in January before everything went down, the Winter Jazz Fest was happening, and so the Rope-A-Dope guys put together the Rope-A-Dope All-Star Band, which is one half of it. It was like me and Aaron Parks and Matthew Stevens and Corey Fonville. So I think we decided we're going to do a record. We're going to do that record in Sonic Ranch in October, I think, and then another record with Michael Walney. But I'll be in some form or another a producer on that stuff. I'm just trying to do as much as I can right now because it's a tough business. Like I'm not Mike Elizondo or something like that. He's been doing it forever. I'm just trying to put down some roots that, maybe at some point when live music comes back, I can make some smarter choices instead of having to do it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. So, I mean, yeah, I just, I've kind of gotten used to this kind of hanging around thing. I like it. I mean, of course I'm not making as much money, but I'm getting paid to produce people's records, and that's really fun. And it's like, the whole process of it is really kind of interesting, like helping people find arrangements that are cool for their tunes. And then a lot of it is, then you have to edit it in Pro Tools and get it mixed, which I don't really mix. I get my friends to mix it. Like Jason Kingsland's doing a lot of my mixing, or in the past it's been like Jeff Stanfield and all these guys who've made some good records. So, that's kind of like part of the process. And then, but the Moot Points track you were talking about before, yeah, that was a fun one. Like, because that's my friend Alison, and he wrote that song with my wife Rachel. So I just kind of and he had some tracks existing already for that. Like he had some kind of idea, and I was just like, let me have this, and I just kind of went at it, and that's Corey Fonville on drums actually on that. In fact, it was mixed by Jason Kingsland. But yeah, that was one where I just kind of sometimes I just hear stuff and I go, let me hear, let me produce this. You know what I mean? And that's as long as people can. And there was no real cost involved besides paying for the mixing and mastering and all that stuff. So and they decided to do that video. I'm not ever on the video end of stuff. I'm just even on my Patreon I'm like reluctant. It's just like, oh,
yeah.
God, I gotta shoot another video. So I don't know. I mean, that's just kind of in a perfect world that it would be like tour 25% of the time and produce records. Would do records, you record, even just record, 75% of the time at this point. But that might change again. I mean, who knows?
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. It seems to me like, I mean, I have no production chops, and I think it seems like that's something that's kind of a must as we continue in the way music is kind of heading right now.
Yeah. I mean, right. I mean, everybody's had a time. Everybody's a producer right now. Everybody's, right. Like and the other thing was like the disappointing part about it all was when we dropped Moot Points, it was just like radio silence. That's something I thought was 100% unique, like really cool track. I was like, yeah, this is going to blow people's minds, and we just didn't want to pay for PR.
Right. And actually, with an amazing video too.
I know, but if you decide, I mean, I don't even know if PR would have helped it because right now like everybody's dropping music, right? There's just like tons of tracks out there in the universe, and so. It's so hard to even, delineate one for the other unless you're already a existing like big band or something like that. So, it was kind of a failure on that front. But at the same time, it's like I'm just glad we did it and it came out great. So,
totally.
You can't worry about how it's going to be received necessarily.
Right. Like maybe that's never the point of making something.
Not really. Yeah. I mean, I thought it would be received better. It was received well. I mean, everybody who heard it was just like, Jesus, that's, and the video too, it blew people's minds. But it was just like a small audience, you know what I mean? I
Right.
thought I was hoping to get a little more notoriety or something. Not for me so much, but Alassane. Alassane's an incredibly talented guy from Phoenix here, and so yeah, I mean, we're gonna work on some more stuff together because he's just great, and he writes really well with Rachel, and so that's kind of what's happening with that.
Well, I'm looking forward to hearing more from that project.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. I guess kind of to totally pivot, one thing I always like to ask is how you first got started in music, like what initially sparked your interest, maybe when you picked up the bass, if you could tell us that history.
Well, my dad was a middle school music teacher.
So was
Um,
mine.
so cool, right? So it's usually get chosen, right? It's like there's not a choice.
Right.
But in when I went to school in Foxborough, Mass, which was kind of has a semi well-known high school music program. Like the high school music director is a pretty famous guy. He's retired now, but like he turned that program into a juggernaut. And we were like sort of like a third of the way along. Like two-thirds of when he got famous was way after I graduated high school. So he had a lot of years in with a bunch of people. But anyway, so like between my dad, like basically like watching me play acoustic guitar, my sister's acoustic guitar, just playing single notes, and playing along with records and stuff. And he's just like, "Oh, you're a bass player." There was not even any discussion about it. So,
Yeah.
you know, uh, and then like because of the high school, I think in fourth grade you can start playing horn. So I was forced at gunpoint to play alto sax. I just was doing that I just did that stuff so I could play bass in the jazz band. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I went through a lot of iterations of it, but yeah, but that's kind of the beginning of it, And also my older brother, we were all big kind of jazz heads, and so like he kind of, here, check this record out, like those everybody we were friends with was like big into records, and so we just checked out a lot of records, and it helped shaped the whole thing.
Do you remember some of those early ones that like maybe are still favorites that you can come back to?
Yeah, there was like I can't remember what it's called, but it was something with Alphonso Johnson on it, which kind of flipped me out. It was like, you go check out Alphonso Johnson. And then this band called Matrix out of Santa Barbara, Randy Tico is his bass player. It's just like kind of, we played that in high school combo or something like that. But then, it was sort of like some of that stuff. And then I got the Miles Davis Coltrane bug and it was over, I just kind of went down that wormhole really hard. And then, it's the Blue Notes and, as much as I could get my hands on in high school, I just did that. John Schofield. But at the same time, I grew up, I was an 80s kid, and like there was some incredible, like that was kind of the birth of hip hop too. So, I was like way into Run DMC, their first record. And then, then Public Enemy came out, and I was like the only kid in town, like bumping that on my loud car stereo, and Miles Davis Decoy. And, so it was a whole bunch of weird, that's that era, So yeah, it's interesting. So, cause a lot of people, you talk to people now, they don't know this. Everybody knows Public Enemy, but they don't know who Daryl Jones is, who played bass on Decoy, or, everybody knows Marcus Miller because obviously he's more famous, but they don't know about Daryl. So I was like really into Daryl and John Schofield and all those guys. So
that's awesome. Did you go to formal like jazz school, like for college?
No, because I didn't. First of all, my parents wouldn't let me. Like I tried to go to UMass. I got into UMass. I got into University of Rochester had Eastman school as a corollary school. So I went up first couple of years I was at Rochester. I played in the Eastman bands. I played in Bill Dobbins' band. But like there was always Berkeley and all that stuff. But my parents didn't want me to get a music degree. So I know, ironically.
Yeah.
So I ended up, just getting a degree I got actually double majored in economics and political science.
Oh wow.
At U of R, which is a good school. I mean, it was no joke. It just, it wasn't music school. So, and like frankly, like my high school band director, Steve Massey, was like, I took theory in high school. It was just kind of like, I kind of felt like I had it. I didn't feel like I knew everything, but it was a good, really, really good carpet to start things off. So,
Yeah. I was gonna ask like between like upright and electric, like where you like found yourself most at home, or like if you, I don't know exactly how to phrase it, but like the differences and what you like about each and maybe what you prefer, have a preference.
Oh yeah. When I moved to New York, I fancied myself a straight ahead jazz player. You know what I mean? I was just like, okay, I'm going to go play upright and go to these. I went to all the jam sessions and stuff like that. But a lot of my gigs were happening on electric, like paying gigs. Like I was either doing weddings or, Chuck Loeb started hiring me. I was playing with Laney Stern a little bit. So you know, like at the 55 bar and stuff like that. And it was mostly playing electric, and occasionally I play upright on those gigs too. But so I would, you know, I was always playing it, but I wasn't necessarily, you know, getting hired for it. So it's like, you know, it just kind of went like that. And so I don't know. I mean, you know, I love. It just depended on the project. I remember, you know, the early to mid no, was it? No, late 90s. I was playing with this guy Till Bronner, who's a German trumpet player, and it was all acoustic. So like, I was flying over to Germany with my upright bass, and like, you know, leaving the case at Tegel Airport, and you know, just humping around Europe. But it was cool because I got to play my own bass every night, so that was good. It was good. On the other hand, it was bad because my upright was kind of like the neck was broken on it, so the action was like really, really incredibly high. So like, you know, I got a complex about it, you know, in that era, just going, man, I suck at upright, you know. And it's kind of tough to overcome that. Now I feel like I can play it okay, you know. And I also didn't study formally with anybody, which is a mistake. I should have. So when I was in New York, like, you know, right before I moved to LA, it was like, you know, 2008, 9 or 10 or something like that. You know, I started inviting a couple of people over, like Matt Pavolka, Linda O, Nick D'Amato, just to watch them, just to, you know, it was just a hang. I wanted to see how other people played upright bass, you know. So that was kind of like the only time I really studied some upright. You know, and then once I got those kind of habits together, like I sort of once I watched them, I figured out stuff I could practice to make myself technically better. Because as you know, it's an infinite amount of work that'll never end. Like how, you know, how to play stuff in different positions and how to negotiate parts and crap like that. So it's just like, man, it's pretty impossible. So you have to kind of like put some work in, which I had never done, which I finally did. And then, you know, electric just kind of came easy, you know, it just kind of played along with records and just kind of kept that going. And just, you know, and I never studied with anybody on that instrument either, but like, you know, probably Wayne Krantz is a teacher, you know, just because he's a heavy improviser and heavy composition, and like just rhythmically, it's just, you know, and it taught me how to play, like he taught me like how to play on the grid, and you know, it was pretty fascinating to play with somebody like that who's so rhythmically advanced. So
totally.
Yeah.
I kind of want to talk about like diversity, and like you've played in so many different settings. Maybe if you could talk about like how you adapt to different settings, like advice you might give to someone who's embarking on a new musical situation they haven't been in before. Anything you've learned along the way.
Yeah, I mean, for instance, I'm sure I'm going to have like coming up. I don't know what's going to be coming up, but at the point where it's a new gig for me, I mean, I guess the most important thing is to know like have some idea what the music is. In terms of like joining up a gig or something like that, you know, like a tour, or, you know, like it's important to know what you're jumping into personally. But yeah, a lot of it's, you know, just kind of like learn the music. Like that's the most important thing, like have that together. Right. And then you can sort of take it from there, because that'll back up anything. You know what I mean? You could be the biggest jerk in the world, but if you know the music, not that I advocate that, I don't, but if you know the music, then you're not going to have too many problems. Like getting along with people and stuff. And like, you know, I don't like basically what happened to me. Like when I graduated college, I went right out to a cruise ship with guys who were like twice as old as me, if not older, you know, and they just thought I sucked. And I was just like, and that was crushing for me. And I was just like, okay, that is gonna never happen again. Right. So that's where I'm at this point. And so like, even now, just because my self-esteem can't take it if someone thinks I suck, you know, which I'm sure people do think I suck. So it's like, but it's okay, you know, like now, you know, like I'm kind of insulated from some of that, but yeah, I just don't ever want to suck. That's kind of the biggest thing. I mean, I hope that answers the question.
Yeah. I mean, do you have like things you practice to be able to learn stuff quickly, or is that just like over time become a skill that's easy?
I find like, you know, like if you're going to be on a gig where you can't read the music, like I find that writing it out initially really helps me cement it sort of. And then at some point you'll get over the hump of knowing it. You know what I mean? Like for me, it takes like when Tedeschi Trucks was playing, like, you know, it would take me 3 or 4 gigs before I knew the tune, you know, or 2, at least twice. You know what I mean? Like I'd have to have it on the floor, like kind of cheating, looking along with it. because we ended up like learning a lot of songs, and sometimes we'd keep them in the set, and sometimes we wouldn't.
Mhm.
But so like it was kind of like just to keep that, keep that. I'm just not I don't have a photographic memory, you know what I mean? So it's not, or in my ear doesn't, it's probably because my dad, like when I was a kid, like I just was very resistant to watching his left hand and like learning changes to like, he had this group, he'd do weddings in Boston on the weekend. And so like I'd have to follow his left hand. So, and it's just like, I just developed a resistance to that. So learning tunes by ear, oh yeah, it just goes to C and goes to, like, cause there's people who do that,
Yeah.
people who are not, like they don't know the language or whatever like that. They won't, like I'd much prefer to see a chord chart, makes life so much easier, but a lot of people aren't equipped to do that. So it's just like, yeah, then it goes to C and then it goes here and then they just do it. And like, and you don't know when it happens. And it's just like, oh,
Mhm.
I'd have to go like, just let me write it out and we'll take it from there,
Yeah, I'm kind of the same way. I think I have like a fear that if I am in a situation and don't know a tune and I read, like I'm going to be judged in the jazz world. So I have like a fear of that I'm like working
I
on.
just no, in the jazz world, I think it's expected. Of course, you're going to
Yeah.
read. Yeah, I can't do a gig. If I was going to do like a gig of standards, of course, I'm going to have the real book open. You kidding me? I don't know any. I think it's fine. You know what I mean? I think it's probably you get judged harder on like a rock gig if you're like reading.
Hmm.
I used to have people make fun of me because of that. It's just like, hey man, this is the only gig I'm doing, and then
Right,
you know.
totally.
Yeah, I was saying that I got a tour with Bryan Adams once, and I was just like, man, because I was coming off a Tedeschi Trucks tour, and we were in like Australia and Japan, and I was like, man, I don't know if I have time to really memorize this stuff. But I tried to actually not do the tour, which is insane. But he's like, he wouldn't let me say no. So I said, okay, well, I may have to read things occasionally, So like, I had a little binder of the charts I wrote up, like right behind me on the amp. But I really never ended up using them because it's Bryan Adams, like everybody
Right.
knows that stuff. Everybody my age knows that stuff. So.
One thing I also wanted to ask was, so when you moved to LA, like was that to do more studio work or what was the reasoning for
Yeah,
that?
that was the aim, but it didn't pan out that way. Um, I still I just don't think I'll ever be an A-lister in LA. I was really trying to be, and I was making progress towards it. And then I got the call for Tedeschi Trucks, so like that just took me out of the loop. And then I'm also like sometimes I'm just not enough of a politician, so it takes a lot of different angles. I can obviously read. I could probably read as good as about anybody who's in that scene, but it's just like you also have to be around and you have to like hustle it. And it's just I have so many other interests and things like that I just don't necessarily gravitate towards that. I mean, I've gotten some great stuff, like these kind of niche little things, like with some A-listers, some studio A-listers, and it's fun. I just did a thing last week with Lyle Workman and Matt Chamberlain, and that was in LA. And like I'm telling people now I'm not in LA, so if they want to use me, blah blah blah, but they made it work and it was great. That's the kind of stuff like, yeah, Matt Chamberlain and I like are friends now, and like, and he's obviously an A-lister. The guy is unreal in the studio, and it's also like his studio is just like, so much unbelievable gear, and it's just like it's just dialed in. As soon as you press go, it's like the drum sound is dialed in, so it's pretty amazing. But so yeah, there's just people like that. Like that's all he does is record. So like that's what happens. Not all. I mean, but most. I mean, he tours with Bob Dylan once in a while, but really like the thing is recording at his place. So, and that's what I've sort of been investing in like synthesizers and some recording stuff, and definitely I've upped my game recording wise this year for sure. It's because I sort of had to. So.
Do you have any tips, like for me personally, and I think a lot of people who are newer to like recording, if I get in there and I get all nervous, it's like, oh, we're taking a take now. Like, do you have any advice for how people can work through that like studio fear mindset? Because it's like a different thing, I feel like, than playing a live performance.
Yeah, it can be. Well, the first thing you could do is make sure your headphone mix, if you're assuming you're playing with headphones, make sure your headphone stuff is straight. So you can hear, like, you want it to basically sound like a record in your headphones. You know what I mean? Like everything should be balanced nicely. Like obviously you want to hear yourself more than anything. So you just kind of find out what you're comfortable with, what you're hearing, and then just kind of like try not to rush.
Yeah, I rush.
That's kind of my thing. Yeah, I mean, who doesn't? I mean, that's a tricky thing. Like to not sound rushy is really hard. So, and sometimes it's a matter of like how you're hearing yourself back. Sometimes too. Like I was making the mistake here at my house. Like I was monitoring through my interface, which made things like sort of kind of dicey. And I mostly tracked into Ableton Live. I'm sort of switching over to Pro Tools now because it's easier to monitor. But like sometimes the timing would get weird in Ableton. So like I kind of stopped monitoring through the interface and started monitoring through Ableton, which taxes your computer a little bit more, but that's, like timing wise, I think it's a little more accurate. But yeah, I mean, like it's kind of like, and once you start doing it a lot, you'll start embracing, what you need to work on and what you don't need, like what's cool and what works and what doesn't, you know what I mean? Because I'm sure everybody everybody has the harmonic information. It's how you make stuff feel. And since I play bass, it's sort of important that I anchor it, like it feels good and that I'm playing the changes the right way,
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's like it depends on and also it's trickier in jazz because, okay, what are we really going for here? Like, you know what I mean? Like, do you want this to be nuts? Do you want it to be like, super chill, like, like kind of blue, or, like there's obviously a million angles to it, so.
Yeah, it's so different when you're like doing a take with a band and it's like the take of a jazz tune versus like tracking individual parts for like.
Yeah. And and one of the things you're going to find is like the more you record, especially with jazz things, like jazz projects aren't always going to have big budgets, so you're going to wind up in studios with the headphone mixes a little compromised, and that's tricky. You know what I mean? Like, because you're not hearing things correctly sometimes, and just like whoever's paying for the session is going to hear themselves the loudest, which could really screw you up. So
yeah,
this is one of those things.
Would you say you like have a preference between live and studio playing, and like why?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what we're talking about live. I mean, it's just I've just done some. I'm not trying to sound like a like a genius or anything, but I mean, I've just done so much different stuff that it's just like it really depends on what's happening, what the project is. There's been sometimes in the studio and just like, yeah, that's incredible. Like you're like, obviously, although it's funny, and this is, I don't say this often very much in public. Like when we were doing Black Star, the Bowie record, like I wasn't leaving like blown away because it was so incomplete. I mean, it's just like, okay, that was cool. But then when I heard the record done, like mixed and mastered, like I was just like, holy shit! Yeah. I was like, wow, it just so you can't really guess like what things are going to come out like. So that was like, as a studio experience, I was like, okay, cool. I'm in the studio with Bowie. Obviously, yeah. That's a heavy thing. But like live, I did some of the best gigs I ever did with Tedeschi Trucks. Which is shocking because like normally some of the best gigs I would normally say my best gigs always happen at the 55 bar. So in New York, because some of those were the best gigs. But then I got surprised a few times, like one, and especially in front of like 4,000 people. There was one night, I think it was like 2017 or 2018. We were at the Chicago Theater and just leveled the place. Like honestly, I felt like I was in a small club. Like just everybody was so dialed in, and which happens once in a while. Like so it just depends. It's. But to say I like one or the other is always challenging. You know what I mean? I think like, if you want to get, the instant gratification, sure, playing live is better, right? But then, like if you're in the studio, like, yeah, right. Sometimes your attention span isn't what it should be, or, you drink too much coffee, and it's just like, there's a million factors in the studio that, I mean, you just gotta kind of hope you don't get your tracks replaced, but usually, I mean, they're both really fun in their own ways, and and hopefully you're getting paid for what you're doing in the studio too. It's to me, it's more of a feather in the cap that I'm getting paid to play tracks for people. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, somebody thinks I'm good.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, it's kind of a nice thing.
Well, I'm sure you get asked all the time, but since you mentioned Black Star, like, could you share a little bit about what it was like to work on that project and maybe any stories you would be willing to share?
Oh, sure. Yeah, that was a fun one. I mean, so before, like basically how it happened was, David was like, I guess, he'd signed up, I can't remember her name now. The big band.
Maria Schneider.
Yeah, Maria Schneider. Sorry. I'm getting old. I'm forgetting names. Yeah, so Maria Schneider and him did a track together. They did that Sue in a Season of Crime.
Yeah.
And so like they were all very into it. Like she wrote that with him, Maria. So I think there was interest afterwards from Bowie to do a whole record like that, you know, with the Maria Schneider big band. But she was working on the Thompson Fields, I think, that record. They ended up winning a Grammy. So I was like, you know, so she said, no, I can't do it. I don't have time. So like, why don't you check out Donnie McCaslin's band? So she gave him Casting for Gravity, the CD. That was the kind of Donnie's. That was the record we did with Dave Binney was producing, and so he loved like Praia Grande and a couple other tunes, and so he kind of booked us, and then he snuck into the 55 bar when I think it was like June of 2014 or something like that. Something like, yeah. But yeah, he came in, like he snuck in and snuck out. I didn't even know he was there. I had a disaster set. Like my shit was getting unplugged from the wall. It's just like, oh my God. I was blowing up the speaker cabinet. It was awful. But you know, like he knew it. I mean, just the energy of the band was what he was like kind of focused in on. So yeah, and then we didn't hear about it for a little while because I think that's when he got diagnosed with liver cancer. So he put it off till the winter of 2015. Is that right? Yeah, 2015. So then we started in January 2015, and it was interesting. You know, he came in and he was all chemoed out. You know, so we were all, but we were asked to like not say anything. You know, and just because he had asked us, like as a gentleman, like of course we weren't going to say anything. But we signed NDAs, but you know, that we were doing this record, and so everything was like pretty hush hush. So yeah. Then that's how it all started. So then we started recording, and he was in the same room with us singing. So you know, like on all his vocal tracks, you can hear the drums bleeding into his mic and stuff. And I think on is it "Girl Loves Me"?
I love that song.
Yeah, me too. I think they used it. Now, what's that? One of the songs has the snare drum from his vocal mic, from him doing a live track with us. And I can't remember what it is. I'll yeah, I just can't remember what it is. And also, like when you listen to "'Tis a Pity She Was a Whore," you know, when he yells, he's like "woo" at the end. That was a live take. I mean, you know, they kept that in there. He was like screaming, you know, because it's kind of a place that I think that was the first time like that we had like met what he was thinking could happen. You know what I mean? Like all this fire going on, and Donnie's taking this like outrageous solo, and he's just like, I think he was like, okay, we arrived. This is doing what I wanted to do. You know, so that was fun. It was super cool.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and the other things, like me and Mark Giuliano we did everything in about 2 or 3 takes, you know, because we sort of like had everything charted out. And there's an example. I brought charts to Bowie session, sure, you know. So we had everything written out. So we just go in and fly through a couple takes. Like one would be very safe. Thank you, you know, here you go, Mr. Bowie. here's our conservative take, and then he'd be like, no, him and Tony Visconti would be like, nah, I need it more nuts. So, you know, Mark would play more and I'd play more, and, you know, would be done with the take. And then, so pretty much what you hear on and also if you made a mistake, like you had to point out your own mistakes. Like they were not, like it's, in the rock and roll world, it's a little more self-policing, you know what I mean? Then was that the right note? Like they're thinking about big picture and not thinking about individual notes or whether a fill is offered, you know? So like, that was kind of interesting that we had to kind of figure out, if you knew you made a mistake, you just, let me fix that, or,
right.
You know, so there's a lot of that. But yeah, Mark and I would finish in 2 or 3 takes, go sit on the couch with David and shoot the shit and insult each other, and, you know, let's have a laugh while Donnie and Jason Lindner were doing Overdose. So it was fun.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. That's yeah, such a cool. I've listened to that album like so many times.
Yeah, I got back into it. There was a period I couldn't do it for a second, just because that period of time was like, you know, when it came out, it was like extreme elation, and then it was also very sad at the same time. Right, and, you know, like it wasn't like Bowie and I were like big buddies or whatever, but we were acquaintances. And actually I had some lucid dreams where he was in it, like talking to me. So, you know, it was kind of, and it was funny because then I wound up on another record of his that he wanted to remake. So it was sort of like, you know, he wasn't done with me or something. It was interesting. Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool.
Yeah.
Oh, one thing I always ask, since we're a youth jazz organization, is like what advice you would give to a young musician who's like just starting out as maybe an improviser or is just like stoked about music and wants to do it for their career? Do you have advice you would give them?
Yeah, sure. I mean, especially if you're going to be in the jazz realm, I think there's a tendency for like young jazz people to like not go very far back into the history. Like, everybody is, including when I was coming up, like I was pretty resistant to it. But so like you have to really go back, like to Art Tatum, go back to all the beginning guys, because it once you realize like where everybody was coming from, like I always, what it kind of hit me like once, I was just like, yeah, like I was so into Herbie Hancock. It's like, man, I wonder who's getting him. It was like Wynton Kelly. It was unbelievable. I was just like, wow, it's all there. At least to some degree, like those guys all checked out, Art Tatum, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But so it's worth it to go back and really listen to who's influencing who. Like I know a lot of young kids are like way into Brad Mehldau, but really where Brad Mehldau is coming from is Keith Jarrett to me. I'm borderline obsessed with Keith Jarrett, so it's just one of those things. But I think people forget that's you always have to keep going back to like always wear out the blue note sides and stuff like that, and just because like even though it's kind of all the same kind of thing, but like it's just the writing is incredible on it, and the playing is obviously. I mean, you think about it, it's like the 50s and 60s, like how high level those players were. There weren't that many people. Like there's a lot of people now who can play like that. Not the same vibe, but like they're just as technically skilled. But man, I mean, back then there wasn't that many. So like that's why bebop and all that stuff was new back then, because it's just like wow, it's a whole new technical level of stuff. And Coltrane and all those guys.
Yeah, and all the answers are always there in the history.
That's right. That is right. Yeah, and like if you're looking to do something different, it's like okay, I'm going to go check out Slam Stewart or what. I mean, it's just like there's always a guy back there who can point you in a new direction now.
And then like, what are your thoughts about like taking all of those influences and somehow emerging with your own distinct musical voice?
I mean, I didn't do it so consciously. I just kind of like I listened to it and absorbed it. I didn't even necessarily transcribe it all, but I just took it in, and it's sort of like it all comes out however it comes out. You know what I mean? Like for instance, like when I'm doing this like kind of free shredding thing that I'm doing, I mean, really, because I was too lazy to transcribe it, but it's all really Jaco Pastorius, like like the fast shredding stuff on like Mr. Gone, or like just those records like I've listened to death, and I never really. What's the word? I mean, it's part laziness and part naivete, but it's just like I just didn't really transcribe the stuff. I just kind of like, okay, but I think the feel and the aesthetic of it can remind you of Jaco. It's not just pulling it out of thin air. You know what I mean? Like I'm trying to have that swing and that touch that Jaco had, even though I'm not playing nearly the same notes. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah. And even just like listening and taking in something will inevitably come out. And
yeah, right. And like I really wore out John Scofield records, and like they had this record called Still Warm in the 80s and stuff. So like even though I didn't transcribe the solos, like a lot of that stuff would just kind of hit me like all of a sudden like rhythmically, or even when I was just playing bass stuff, like it just like it rubbed off on me somehow. It wasn't just like checking out bass players.
Right. Yeah.
No.
Cool. Well, let's get into some audience questions.
Yeah.
You've played a lot in the upper range with an octave pedal, but with your bass at hip level. Do you have an approach to thumb placement when playing higher up on the neck, or has it been a natural evolution?
Yeah, it's natural evolution. I'm not saying I haven't injured myself doing it the way like playing it low and just like kind of if I have it slung low, then it's hard to play. I hurt myself playing chords up there for sure, because I just refused to have the bass up here. But yeah, but it's just kind of natural. You don't have to change too much. I don't have it so low where I'm just like it's just a hot mess down there. It just happens to be where it is. You know what I mean? But I don't really think about it. And even when I teach students, I don't wear people out about hand position. It's just like whatever works for you, as long as it's sort of efficient. As long as you're not tripping over yourself, then anything is fine. You know what I mean? You just want to make sure that you're that it works. That's all. To accomplish what you want, what you're hearing. So that's kind of like the answer to that. And then what's it saying? The same going back to early jazz. Have you done that with R&B soul music? Yeah, I mean, I had to because I skipped that whole. I skipped that whole, because of I was playing with Wayne Krantz, like I wasn't allowed to play like James Jamerson, for instance. There was no need for me to sound like that. You know what I mean? And actually, if you listen to Wayne Krantz Trio, the more the people did that, the worse it sounded actually. Because it's it's like one, like not to denigrate what Jamerson was a genius, but a lot of it's just 1-5-1, just like like it's not harmonically like the way he negotiated the tunes was just like kind of bouncing around, but it was all simple harmonically. You know what I mean? So sometimes when you it's kind of cooler to avoid that. Also, like a lot of people do play like James Jamerson. You know what I mean? Like that's kind of a lot of people's home base, and it's just like it's not that original. It's great, like I'm not saying it's not, and that's what a lot of gigs require, which I can do. I just like if I know that I'm going to be in a situation where I don't need to do that, or if it's like an improvisatory situation and I just kind of have like a bass that sounds like James Jamerson, like maybe that's a weird thing to pull out, like just playing like like the weirdest kind of chord progression in a James Jamerson style could be cool sometimes when you're improvising,
Mm-hmm.
So it just depends on like what's going on in your head, so
Totally.
But that's a good question. I mean, I don't know all the R&B and soul music, and I actually don't care to, and that doesn't mean I'm a genius for not caring to. It's just, there's a certain amount of it. I mean, I love Booker T and the MGs. I mean, it's endless. Sam Cooke, those guys are incredible, and it's just. But again, it's like that one thing, and it's just like I'll check it out if I need, as I need to. You know what I mean? Like sometimes people throw an old record at me though, and it just floors me. Like Aretha Franklin, live at the Phil Maurice. It's just like it's over.
Mm-hmm.
And I have plenty of that stuff, and I do listen to it a lot. But it's really great on vinyl too. It's not fun on digital, listen on iTunes. So should I address?
Yeah. What are the basics of bass playing that you keep in mind across all the different ensembles you play in?
Okay. Not sucking. Start with that. I don't know. I mean, yeah, somehow like I look for points to inject some stuff in that might kind of keep momentum going along. Like no matter what, I mean, there's always a thing you can do, even in like a very, like I just did this track for this German guy who was doing a country tune, and literally he wanted me to play his exact same bass line. Like I was doing it 2 bars at a time in Ableton, just boom, 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 and just gluing it all together. But then I did a couple takes where I played like a couple licks, right? A couple of my things or whatever it was. And he's like, yeah, put that in there. It's just one of those things where, yeah, it's just, so like, I always try to find stuff like that to put in. But like you just got to be functional, like play. I mean, now you're asking me like the question is like, across all the ensembles you're playing. I mean, like now it's just been recording, so like I'm in that mode most of the time. Occasionally there's like some live stuff going on. When I played the Baked Potato last week with a couple guys with Justin Brown and Hattis Buckingham and Scott Kinsey, and like so the basics of that were it's a different like I wasn't going too incredibly effects heavy this time. I was sort of just kind of playing bass, and I caught myself doing some pedestrian stuff, and I was like, okay, I gotta stop this, just because like it's been 15 months. I don't know what's right and wrong anymore. I mean, like the whole paradigm is going to change. It's so weird. Like the whole business is going to change. Like, well, even when I'm playing, I don't want to get too far off the train tracks, from what I was doing before. But it's been a long time, so I'm like, naturally, in a year and a half, you evolve. So it's kind of see what happens, So, but yeah, I mean, hope that answers the question. I've just sort of, I guess it's like stick to who you are, but like, in my case, like when I'm playing, I'm just kind of out there to serve. I'm not there to, it's not about like me being like, oh, let me put my stuff on this. It's like, it's not always like that. It's more like, just like, okay, what's going to make this the best thing possible?
Yep, serving the music.
Yeah. And also, and sort of staying in your lane, and then knowing when to not stay in your lane.
Yeah.
Because after all, I mean, once that's why people hire you sometimes, you know what I mean? It's like, hey, do your thing, like they don't want the boring. Oh, you need to know how to do the boring, pedestrian stuff, obviously, as a bass player, especially. But yeah, being able to inject stuff where you think is needed is also clutch. So,
do you have any like dream projects that you have always wanted to do that maybe you haven't started yet, or that like if nothing was a factor, you would do?
I mean, yeah, I mean, I was saying this back in the day, like, you know, like when I was really in it, like I wanted to do like it would have to be collaborative, needless to say, but like, you know, like a band with like Doyle Bramhall and Derek Trucks and like JJ Johnson, you know what I mean? Just like, and just go. And that would be fun. But you know, there's too much management and stuff involved for things like that to happen. So, I mean, I don't know. I want to play with Nine Inch Nails at some point, or at least work with those guys with Trent and Atticus Ross, because they're fascinating to me. Yeah, I mean, you know, I would like to place a bunch of songs in movies or whatever. I mean, that would be great, or score stuff. But I'm, you know, like I did go to music school, so like scoring's a little out of my element. I think I could do interesting, weird electronic stuff, but you know, I don't want to be out of my element, and I have a feeling. Also, you know, like I'd also need a person to buffer, you know, between me and the director. You know, like I'm just not politically savvy enough sometimes. You know, it's just like, I don't know what you mean. Like, you know, just like those are things that people like that never want to hear. You know what I mean? You're basically the slave. So, yeah.
That's cool. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, is there anything you've been listening to that's been super inspiring lately, that any jazz or otherwise that you're super into?
Let me look at my phone. Hang on. Yeah. I'm back on Meshuggah, Violent Sleeper Reasoning. It's just an incredible, you know, they tracked it live. That was the first live record they did in a while. So it's just like, just trying to like hear their phrasing and like what rhythmically, it's so heavy. It's just incredible. So it's just like, you know, I'm trying to wrap my head around that. Yeah, I just picked up some stuff I used to listen to. What did I just get re-obsessed with? It was something I just got re-obsessed with. I can't remember what it is. Well, I mean, you know, I obviously with streaming, like I wasn't streaming too much. So like, you know, I got back into all the Miles records and, you know, Black Coats from the Underground, which is actually, even though it was in the 80s, that's a classic. That's, as far as I'm concerned, that's an absolute classic. So I recommend that record to everybody. Like that's about everybody, even though they're really young, it's about everybody playing at the height of their game. You know what I mean? Including Wynton. I haven't heard Wynton play any better than that since then. Let me think. I'm still going to look at my phone. Hang on. What else have I been listening to? I kind of like that Pino Palladino Blake Mills record is pretty good. That's a good one.
That's been getting recommended by like everyone I've interviewed. Everyone
yeah, it's good.
Yeah,
it's super creative and fun. It's and Pino, who knew Pino could really write really well? So that's a good one. What else? You know, I'm an 80s kid, so like I just been going back to those records in the 80s. You know, like I just started streaming Still Warm again, that John Scofield record. And I was like, it just, to bring me back to that era, I was just like, God, because I wore that record out. I was just like, man, I was 100% different person. But it's fascinating to hear it back then. You know. Oh man, you know what? There's a Keith Jarrett record. It's from the Legrand studio. You know, because he was on Impulse, right? Remember Impulse? There's a record called Hamburg '72, which is also on YouTube, by the way. Yeah, I mean, next level. But this is like 2 days later in Paris at Legrand Studio 104, I think it's called, and it's a bootleg. It's not on any label. It's just some. Yeah, you have to, and it's only available on vinyl, and it is mind-boggling. It's actually next level from Hamburg '72. So yeah, I was just like, it's outrageous. You know, like those guys at the prime of their career. So you know, yeah, I've always gone back to Keith. Keith is the greatest. Like he called himself the Coltrane of playing standards, and he's right. I mean, who else is? I mean, just such a genius. I hope he's okay. I don't think he is, but man.
Yeah, he's like not playing anymore. Is that right?
I think he had a stroke. He had some debilitating thing go down. So he's in tough shape. I know. But you know what? He left a huge library of stuff. It's not like, you know, he doesn't owe us anything else, you know. And I know sometimes he was disagreeable and stuff like that, but he was worth it to me. You know, I saw him when I was at U of R. I saw him at Eastman Theater with that trio with Jack and Jack Deason. That's another treasure too. But you know, Gary Peacock and Jack, and it was mind-boggling. But you know.
Well, I guess we have one more audience question. Might be a good place to leave it, if that's cool with you.
Yeah.
So given all the changes over the past 12 plus months, what are some things you would do differently in the music industry moving forward?
I don't know. I'm sort of just being obstinate right now. If I'm going to do another project, I want the business to be right. You know, like if I'm going to go back out and do what I was doing, because man, I'll tell you, I was burnt. Like when this all ended, like I flew home from, Europe last year in March, and I was just burnt because I basically left before the Michael Walney gigs. I was teaching in Zurich for a week, so, and I had a little thing in Seattle at the Mopop Museum for Brandy Carlisle. I was doing with this thing, so it was a tribute to her. So like I was basically gone from the beginning of December till about March when I came home. So I was pretty fried. Because the road is hard, man. So it's you know, I'm like 25 pounds lighter. It's just like I like this life of being home and not being stuck on airplanes, and
Yeah.
you know, but it's all good. I mean, you know, like and I'm gonna have to go back to it at some point, I know, but I'm trying to lay other inroads so I don't have to always rely on it. So that's what I would do. You know, I'm not taking any crap from anybody right now either. It's like, you know, like if I'm, unless it's something that's really kind of special, I'm just like, whatever, you know, like come to me with what, you know, I want it to be right if I'm getting in an airplane, basically.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
I feel like similarly. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
oh, sorry. Yeah. I mean, you know, things are going to, like, it's going to be, although I know like Live Nation's going to allow full capacity, all these outdoor venues pretty soon. Like this summer will be regular, I think. I mean, we'll see, you know, see what happens. I just don't trust anything right now. So, you know, I'm going to stay on the sidelines till 2022. So
Yeah, totally.
all good. Yep.
Well, this has been so amazing, and I really, really appreciate you taking the time with us today. I know how much our community appreciates it.
Thank you very much, everybody. It was really, really good questions.
And I love your shirt. It's perfect.
It's called, what was this called? I just got an email from them. It's called Mahogany Mamas. So it's a website. Yeah, it's so cool, right?
Yeah, it's like everything you need to know about life right there.
100%.
Yeah. But Tim, thank you so much. This was really a pleasure, and I'm so grateful that you hung out with us tonight.
Thank you, Camille. Thank you, Colin. Really, it's a blast.